Go. All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's session of the Ostrom Workshop Research Series. It's a great honor and privilege to present today's speaker. Dr. Patricia Uberhuaga is an economist, a research professor at the Universidad Mayor de San Simón in Cochabamba, Bolivia. He has held faculty appointments in both the economics and forestry engineering departments for over 2 decades. He is currently a research chair at the Ostrom Workshop. He holds a PhD in tropical forestry from the University of Copenhagen and a master's in management of agricultural knowledge systems from the Wageningen University, the programs whose methodological traditions she has spent her career putting in product attention. Her research focuses on forest decentralization, the governance of the commons, and indigenous economic systems in the tropical lowlands, a region where land rights, climate mitigation commitments, and community self-determination converge in ways that strain simple policy prescriptions. She is an advocate for polycentric governance, not as a theoretical preference, but as an empirically grounded answer to the question of how local institutional diversity can be a resource rather than an obstacle at scale. As in previous sessions, clarifying questions during the presentation, and the rest of the questions by the end of the presentation. Dr. Uberhuaga, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I have a long history with this Ostrom workshop. As many of you know, I was here like 30 years ago, just starting to understand these institutional things. And my career was influenced by this perspective. Now, I will try to summarize and still discussing all these common governance issues. So this presentation is part of a paper that I'm trying to read, but also part of the process that I have before the year regarding necessity to understand forest common governance now, not only in Bolivia, but in different contexts and in Latin America. The presentation go to these 4 perspectives. I will try to describe an actual situation in order to understand what we had to discuss regarding commons and information about the Bolivia context. And I'm going through all this architecture of forest governance, institutional architecture of forest governance, and the discussion. But let me begin this presentation with a story. Like 2 weeks ago, the Yuracare indigenous people, who were the first indigenous management plan that started with a management plan in 1998, received a first and second place in Cacao of Excellence Award. This was the Wild Cacao Collectors Association. It was recognized among 50 best producers in the communities of Santa Rosa and El Carmen, silver and gold winners, standing out in the global evaluation. So they described the award and the reaffirmness of our forests and the dedicated work of community producers. They place the name of Bolivia in the world's finest cacao. So it was this group that I have been working with. They are located in the north of Cochabamba, in the middle of Bolivia. But as this example, there are many other cases related to innovation, transformation, and institutional, economic, and human change among indigenous population, demonstrating their capacities for forest governance and the many possibilities that they hold. So I'm trying to start with this perspective because, on the other hand, we have all these problems related to fires, agricultural expansion, and all these issues that many of us know. So these transformations have undergone, and the ways that they have adapted eventually represent situations that they would have imagined like 20 years ago. So at that time, when they presented the forest management plan, probably the timber was the main thing, but now they are going to this other. So what happened? So how these transformations have changed their lives and the ways that they select how is the best way to work with forests and develop new institutions related to forests. So probably today, through the articulation with global processes, access to technology, to education, and institutional arrangements, they have transformed and modernized the forms of governance and resource management. So in that sense, my objective is try to understand this forest common governance in Bolivia today. But in order to work on it, so it's needed to understand the historical evolution of forest governance in Bolivia from the 90s to the present. That's something that I'm trying to work with and discuss how forest policies. Sorry, I'm gonna try to close those pop-ups up there. I can't have them. Thank you. And discuss how forest policies contrast with local governance systems, opening the discussion on whether forests can be integrated into a broader debate of the commons. So some definitions. I'm trying to understand forest governance in a broad way related to the any kind of governing arrangements from centralized state to some kind of use-based common property system. It also combines formal and informal institutional arrangements that through which decisions are made, rights and responsibilities are exercised, and the costs and benefits related to forests located. But it's not only what rules and regulation exist, but also how they are implemented and how forests are governed in practice. So, and related to forest common governance, that was my first question, what is forest governance and what is forest commons governance? So I'm trying just to introduce the concept of collective action, saying that agreed upon institutional arrangements and collective action used to manage a shared resource subject to social dilemmas, which is part of the thing that we are studying. So Bolivia, it's in South America, the middle of South America. We are a diverse and also a country with a lot of contradictions. We have like 36 recognized indigenous people in the country, the majority Quechuas and Aymaras, but also we have Chiquitanos, Guaraníes, Moxeños, Hebreos, Iracaris, and many others. And they live with, based on forests. They are forest-dependent people for subsistence activities like hunting, fishing, and others, but also they are integrated with the market with timber and non-timber forest products. They have also consolidated their collective ownership of 25 million of hectares of land in forms of tierras comunitarias de origen, community lands of origin, accounting 23% of the country's total land mass. Also, we have different ecological zones and biodiversity, and Bolivia is a vital biological corridor linking Andes, Amazon, lowlands, and Pantanal wetlands. So almost 40% of the area is protected with conservation areas like this. And these here are the protected areas, and the last year we have all 4 areas as protected areas. These are the forests which are part of the Amazon scene, which are in green. It's like half of the country is covered by forests. In the 90s, it was 48% covered by forests, but today we are like past 39%. So we have 43 million hectares. So most forests are located, you see, in the lowlands. Yeah, and it's Bolivia, it's about 1/3 part country in the Amazon rainforest. As you can see in green, this dark green, these are the indigenous areas where the people now, before like an areas that they used to live, or later the titles. So the thing is where indigenous territories exist, forests stand. But also, you can see that Bolivia is a diverse country in biological things. Is the top 15 most biodiversity countries in exceptional richness in the Andes, Amazonia, and Chaco, as I said. It's the number 11 globally in plants, the number 6 in birds diversity, and the number 3 in butterflies abundance. So we have like also different basins in the middle of South America and close, and it has an important role supporting the hydrological cycle in the region. So if we have floods, so probably it goes, so it will expand to the other countries. So it has an important role. But also we have problems. And we have this paradox because even though we have protected areas and indigenous territories, also we are number 2 in the world as with the second highest deforestation in the world. You can see in this image also Bolivia, the blue are the indigenous groups, the areas where they live, but also these red points are the deforestation in 1992 and the yellows and the deforestation process in 2014. So, and most of them largely concentrated in Santa Cruz, which is the second country in Bolivia, and yeah, one of the richest in Bolivia. So also in this image, and you can see the dark brown. So they are like the indigenous people that have gotten the titles, but also these other brown, there are new petitions, new communities that are getting in the area, the most of them from the highlands. So all these brown in the area, it's people that are asking for titles, and they are settled there, even though they don't have the titles as the first indigenous lands, but they are in the area. The pink points, which is not very clear in the map, so it's part of the deforestation process that we have. Okay, so trying to see the historical process, I'm going to analyze from 1985 to now, trying to understand this process of forest governance, but also related with what happened in the country as economic and political context, the main laws that we have in these periods, but also the forest operational things related with forest use and conservation and access. So I divided these 4 stages based on the main economic issues and economic and political issues that we have had in Bolivia. So if we start from 1985, we came from a really high crisis, the highest that we have in Bolivia, with large inflation rate. But at that time, the state decided to start neoliberal reforms. So we started a process of structural adjustment and neoliberal reforms with the famous Decree 21060 that everyone in Bolivia knows and said, okay, this is the main resolution that we have. And a lot of things happened there from the social perspective, but the mineral price we have this mineral price crisis. The mines were closed and the people were relocated. Many of them went to the lowlands. So from 1996 to 2005, so we were in the process of implemented all these reforms. It's like the consolidation of the cycle of the capitalization and privatization structural reforms, but it goes until 2005 because the last period we have like a contestation of the people. We have a crisis of legitimacy, and we have the water war in 2000 and the gas water in 2003, creating the potential condition for a modern transition. That is the period where the government had to escape from Bolivia because, indigenous people and the people didn't want more this type of perspective. So in 2006, we started a new government with a new ideological perspective and with a completely different perspective from liberalization of the natural resources. We started with the nationalization of these strategic sectors and the state control over economic surpluses. We have this model, social, communitarian, and productive economic model, but it was based on extractivist areas and social cash spheres, the bonus. So at that time, we have high international commodity prices, sustained economic growth was the highest number in Bolivia, but also an increase of public infrastructure. But this nice period only was around 2014, 15, and 2016, we started a new period with prices decline international commodity prices. I call it was a crisis of extractivism. So gas production and revenues decrease, reduction of reserves, but also we have like political crisis in 2019 with electoral fraud and also the pandemic period. And in finish this period with the crisis of shortage of US dollars. So we don't have dollars in Bolivia. Gasoline supply, we don't have gasoline. And also the state fuel subsidy policy until the end of the last year. And for this year, with a new government, we probably will start in a new period, and we don't know what's gonna happen. But yeah, probably we have to learn from our history. So in the same periods, what happened? What were the main laws and reforms? Probably in the first period, we have these decentralization reforms, but also we came from a forestry law from 1974, but basically had the role to authorize selective timber extraction ruled by the Forestry Development Center. And in that period also, we had the first Ministry of Sustainable Development and Environment. We had the popular law, and also we have the administrative decentralization laws that were laws that started to decentralize the state and go to the municipalities and encourage the participation of the people. So in 1996, we had probably the turning point for the forestry sector. We have the forestry law. It is the legal forest rights for private companies and community access to forests based on technical standards, mandatory forest management, planning under the authority of the forestry superintendency. But also we had a fund, receive, centralize, and allocate funding. At the same time, we have this land law, which was also quite important, that has that institutionalized and operationalized framework for land tenure. In the next period, with the change of the government, many other laws appear. So in 2006, we have like community-based reorientation agrarian reform law that it was a change of the previous law with some reorientation, as the name says. And also we have changed our political constitution. Since then we are a plurinational state. Also, it was this. I think this is also an important point. In 2013, we have the Law 300, the framework of motherhood and integral development law, that it tries to integrate collective territorial rights, respect to Mother Earth and food sovereignty and living well was part of the discourse. The forestry law remains the same, but changed the structure. We don't have superintendency anymore. We was decentralized, but we have authority for regulation and social control for forests and land. So forests and land are in the same institution. And in 2013, we have this other law related to exceptional regime to regulate illegal land clearing. So, and at this point, everyone can go and say, okay, I want to regularize the clearance and the agricultural activities that I have done till that time. The next period probably has more laws, because probably we are as I said before, we have a pressure. We were in economic crisis, starting economic crisis. So the pressure was on land use conversion and agro-industrial expansion. So in 2018, we have like a small scale gold mining, expanding concessions, but also authorizing hydrocarbon exploration and exploitation in 2020. In 2021, another fiscal policy related to the general state budget that limits non-essential public expenditures because we were starting the crisis. The middle, some supreme decrees related to protection of wildlife, but also facilitation of investment on lithium in the Salario Uni, and also temporary regulation related to zero aranceles to selected agricultural inputs. And also in 2023, the authorization to the state to purchase gold producing within the country and incorporate in the country international reserves with crisis, starting the crisis. And in 2024, we have the highest fire in the country. So some regulations were changed based on the pressure of people. And it was like increase the fines for burning, but also decree have an ecological pause. And at the end of the 2020, we have just the regulations of what we have. We are going to see the comprehensive management of forest reserves. So it's like, okay, it's not only the land, the fiscal land, the indigenous groups, but also we have to go to the forest reserves. So what are the instruments that we had in laws for this governance, let's say, to access to the forest? In the first period, we have like harvesting contracts with enterprises requiring logging plans, filling permits, transport guides, fee payments, everything under control of Forestry Development Center. In the second period, we have general forest management plans granted access for management rights, incentives to legal revenues, and forest certification. As I said at the beginning, these indigenous groups was the first indigenous group with these forest management plans. And also with these annual forest operating plans were selected harvesting areas in a cycle of cutting. So we have really rigorous technical standard requirements for these plans, and not only enterprises, but also these indigenous groups were part of it. And also was part of it because also was part of the writing of the normals, the technical norms, and also doing and implement these management plans. The next period, with the changes in our in our country, we have not the forest management plan, but we have the comprehensive forest management plans, like it's an alternative of management modality, simplified in the requirements and include not timber, but also non-timber forest products. Later, on 2013, we have like comprehensive forest and land management plans that tries to incorporate community-based land and forest planning based on the capability of the land, but also based on the socioeconomical context. But also we have like land clearing plans that authorize land clearing up to 20 hectares per family. Next period was just some specific regulations trying to implement previous. Yeah, not many things were in this period relating to these instruments. It was a process that people trying to engage on these comprehensive forest and land management plans. So based on that, I try to organize these periods in these 4 areas. The first related with market-led modernization and structural adjustment, as I said. The second related with neoliberal decentralization. The third one related with pluralism, sovereignty, natural resource centralization, and the latest with we are in crisis, related with neo-extractivism expansion and environmental sustainability. So at the same time, we have a lot of problems related. What happened with forest governance? So I'm trying to classify these periods, like the first one related to the productivist timber governance. The second related with decentralized technical forestry governance. The next, centralized state mother herd land and forest commons governance. And the latest, territoriality and institutionally fragmented neo-extractivist forest common governance. So I'm trying to understand these like types of forest governance based on the legal process and and what happened in the country, but also with the specific cases. Probably there are cases as Yuracare people and some others that can fit. I'm trying to these categories and trying to understand if it's right or not, understand the process of forest governance. Some information about forest, just to make a connection with it, is, as I said, we have a loss of a big tree cover loss in 2004. This is also part of the trees that have been lost during that period. Important thing are the main drivers here. It's like some light brown is permanent agriculture, 5-6 million, but also wildfire. And I said, also there are other drivers, but these are the most important, all related in Santa Cruz. But I just want to focus on this graphic because we can see the tree cover and how we have loose trees from burning. And we can see if we can coincide with the periods that we have seen and have shown before, probably in 2006 when the government, the previous government started with this legalization of the areas that have been open for agriculture, or was at the beginning of this burning of these fires. Also in 2016, we have this land plan of clearing, allowing people to fire 20 hectares per family. So it was the process when we started.
In this graph, what is pink and what is brown?
Pink is the tree laws and brown the fires. Yes. So I'm trying to explain the brown, yeah, thank you. So the brown is the fires, and probably it coincides with this process of regulations that we have had. And this is the main drivers of this loss. So 2024, a lot of loss of land, so based on fires. But at the same time, it was a process where this government has to finish. Probably was many people trying to really make sure to have land in these lowlands, to clear the lands, to start agricultural activities, and to claim for land. So it was part of the process. Okay, some discussion, just some points that I would like to discuss, not only in the paper, but also probably in next research. Forest governance has been undergoing process of transformation, as we have seen, and adaptation from technical management schemes to more comprehensive perspective, promoting community-based land and forest planning grounded on the socioeconomic and cultural context of communities. But all these approaches have largely remained top-down. So the government decides, even though with nice perspective, but yeah, so it's top-down. So across all phases, forest policy has largely failed to incorporate local institutional arrangements for collective management of forests and local forest governance systems. So within formal institutions, forest governance appears like parcelized and fragmented. However, we don't know how have indigenous communities adapted to or contested to these processes, how they are governing their shared forest resources. And as I said at the beginning, we have these cases, successful cases. So many things are happening there. So these questions reveal a complex and dynamic institutional landscape that requires further examination and update. We have data here at Ostrom with data from 1990s. So we need to update the data. So for forest policy, prioritize use and specific units of the forest system through mechanism inclusion or inclusion, so who can be part of not forest use. So it facilitates resource appropriation, while mechanism of provisions and collective maintenance remains neglected or insufficient. So understand the limits of appropriation becomes central, whether through redistributing power over forests or through new configuration of access and control. For instance, limiting the appropriability of forests in nature, placing them outside market logics, preventing their commodification, and their enable conservation. So a new perspective to life access. Also, Yeah, forest policy have tended to prioritize land over forest, this parcelized and segmented way of see. Although both occupy the same physical space, they are governed by different legal regimes. It's like ownership versus control. So we have land with property, but we have forest, some user rights or some control mechanism. As a result, forest governance have developed a more sectoral than comprehensive perspective. But in practice, indigenous communities manage interconnected commons, land, forest, water, etc., forming an articulation of commons. So understanding forest commons governance, therefore, requires not only common policy source perspective, but also a broader view as common, like global environmental commons. So consequently, forest governance is not a single homogeneous system, but a complex interplay among land, territory, forests, and wider ecological resources. Thinking another way to understand this. So this brings us the central question. How do people craft institutional arrangements to solve collective problems and to manage shared resources? So thank you. This is my part of my story.
Questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Problems. I think it's not just in Bolivia, but similar situation in our countries. I have a question regarding the. Could you please explain more about the articulation of commons? Is it about a shared governance that across the scale? To be initiated or include indigenous communities. I'm not clear about this.
I think it's just a way to understand, it's a way to say we have to understand. So when law says look in a fragmented way, so it's difficult to understand how they manage, how they articulate these commons. And probably behind this concept or this idea is that we have to discuss if all natural resources are commons, like water is common, forest, but land. We didn't go to mine minerals, I mean, non-renewable products, but I would say that all natural resources can be commons. So in that perspective, so what people used to do in practice is just to articulate the use, manage, and governance of all these commons. This is they are behind this.
Lisa, thank you so much. That was so good. Like how you showed like the economic political context and everything that was happening and was impacting. I want to ask you about the management plans, like as you showed in the beginning, the indigenous group that got the first management plan, and like now we see even like a change of like the product, right, for timber to like the cacao and everything, and how like this management it's like going good. But can you explain a bit like the specifics of these management plans? Because like in the fisheries management that we work in the Amazon, also in the beginning was very much top down. But we see that like the architecture of the community-based management there applied to a very diverse ecological and social culture context. It allows to kind of adapt the blocks of the management And even though it's very diverse, kind of apply and adapt for the context. And pretty much now is it's not a top down, like people kind of like got these and craft out in their own ways, and it's like working and they are recovering the fish. So like if you want, can explain more like these management plans from the community, like the collective management of the forest.
So in 1996, with the forest law, we have like mandatory regulation to do forest management plan. But it was based on timber. So it was a really nice technical instrument to harvest timber. And we started to work on it. And as I said, we are gonna, they had the plans, they have the activities, but it was just timber. So at some point, instance in this group, they couldn't work on it. So for instance, issues like, okay, we are gonna harvest this Monday, let's say. So, and you all 20 are gonna be part of the group. We didn't because they have to harvest, they have to do something else. So we didn't incorporate in this plan other activities. So and there are a lot of cases of failed plans, but we started to make connection with enterprises. So the enterprise had to just go. So they gave the rights of access to this area. But in the second period, when we have this comprehensive forest management, the idea is to work on what happened in the area. I mean, based on the quality of the area, the cultural context, incorporating timber, but some others. Also, it's difficult because, it's expensive and it's difficult to understand, but it's like the regulation said, okay, we have to work on it. Local people has to follow the regulation and all the instructions. So it's difficult. Please different processes start from one and you can recognize this. This is the So in that sense, probably we have a good perspective that is possible to build these comprehensive plans. And see what people are doing.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation, Patricia. This is still ongoing.
Yes, sure.
Still ongoing project. I just wonder because, my mind not very clear. It's not actually my area, but conceptualization a little bit made me actually confused. We prefer first common governance, right? You're gonna use, I think after this process, you are gonna use first because you explain first common governance. And then I just wonder the literature, what does literature say about that regarding Bolivia? And based on this, what kind of gap are you planning to fill in forest governance in terms of, because actually I like the discussion, the third one, in terms of global environmental commons, because you said broader view, we need to see this area and this topic in terms of global environmental commons. I just didn't understand what is your main point, what kind of gap you're planning to fill after, we are done about this research.
Okay. Of course,
We don't know Bolivia, and then I don't know.
So of course we are at Ostrom. We are using all the discussion of governing the commons.
Yeah, of course.
I'm trying to discuss what we understand by commons. So probably this is the main thing, because we have treated forests as common pool resource, like a physical object, but probably we have to think more about this common perspective. Like the social regime and trying to discuss this appropriation characteristics. So probably I won't call the commons governance or forest governance. So I'm just trying to discuss this commons concept. So probably there are some literature also from Latin America discussing about these issues, but how we can go through more than the property rights perspective. That also requires to analyze who gives the rights to use the forest in this case. The power, I think. So probably from Latin American perspective, yeah, there are some other ideas regarding this. So it's just a discussion. I have to elaborate many.
Kind of conceptualization.
Yeah.
Okay, Angelina had her hand.
Oh, okay. Should I go? Thank you, Patricia. That was wonderful. I really love how the graphs, they are all super structured, and then we see the evolution of how you think, and then the process, how you ended at the 4 stages of the governing regimes. I was really fascinated by how you started with kind of periodization of like 4 phases, and also the laws that were that kind of define those phases also. It really kind of struck me how the laws really give me like an impression of a state-led top-down approach. I think you also mentioned that in the discussion, whereas the commons, or the articulation of commons, is like, to me, seems like a decentering of the states, which is a little different than like kind of the legal centered approach at the beginning. I wonder, can you talk a little bit about kind of how you see this the state society kind of relationship, or in other words, probably kind of the dynamics between, you know, like a state-centric legal top-down approach, maybe versus or compared to the processes between different actors, and how I think you also mentioned how the legal approach does not consider how these laws are also contested by local communities. I wonder if you can give us an example of kind of the tension there outside of this like state-centric legal approach.
Probably this third period that we have had with this government, with this plurinationalist government, and with all this perspective of sovereignty, or things have changed many things in the society in Bolivia. So probably now we are not just thinking on, okay, they are there and we are here. So it's like we are part of it. So we are also actors of the process, and we can change the things. So I think in this perspective, for instance, now we are going to have elections very high level in Bolivia. So who are going to present on these processes? They are local people. So they are people from communities. I mean, they are not the normal politicians. So, and they, that's why I was reading, probably they are trying to, these municipality spheres, when they could discuss and they can talk about all these issues. So probably this relation top down is not the same now. So we have to study a bit more on it, because local people now have more like power to do things and to change. The thing is how we can support this process, how we can facilitate it. So probably when we decide things from the desk is quite different from what they are doing, but also we need like dialogue in this. Can keep discussing.
Good question.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for your presentation. It is fantastic to see the been doing as you've been chair here. I think there are very important and relevant interventions to the literature that are gonna be highly valued. I think that your idea of thinking about global environmental commons and articulation of the commons will be super well received in the literature. There is kind of an stagnation there, like a lot of people wanting to think about commons and these pressing issues and these transformations, but not being able to conceptualize global environmental commons from the perspective that you're offering. Some people even refer to the literature on planetary boundaries, which is old, problematic, has been criticized, like that is not the way in which it can be understood. So this is fantastic. And I have a question about three things that I think that could be perhaps addressed in your work. And I was wondering, how do you see it? I think that absolutely this is about control grab, not necessarily land grabbing and water grabbing processes embedded here, but control grab is one form in which you can understand these processes in relationship particularly with agrarian extractivism and the expansion of the soy frontier. So I think soy, if you want to understand fire in Bolivia, you need soy to understand what is happening.
Sure.
So that is one point that I think you know, that maybe you can explain a bit more. The other is that Bolivia is such an important case for institutional analysis and for, you know, legal studies in general because of buen vivir and the rights of nature. It's kind of, you know, the poster child of that kind of legal instruments that, of course, the implementation is what is more complicated, but I think that could be a super interesting aspect also to discuss. I know that you included it. I could read it in your timeline, but if maybe that is another important part. And finally, I'm curious about tree cover because yes, tree cover is one way of understanding forest laws. But sometimes when you think about functionality laws, structure law, the loss of structure, the loss of certain functions of the forest and the loss of livelihoods, that really brings into, I think it makes very clear the catastrophic dimension of this. So it's not recover, it is about all of these systems that support, as you said, you know, water and all other things.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the last point, you are right. Yeah, recover is not the unique variable that we have to understand. I was trying to deal with these maps, how we can understand the impact. Because at the beginning, like forest condition, I mean, how healthy is the forest, and how these reforms, but probably we need more information on it. So it's people to really know. So probably this requires more study on this physical condition of the sun environmental. Yeah, probably we need more. We are, as I said at the beginning, we are very diverse and we have these reforms and institutional changes that need to be understood in order to, to see where we are going with these changes that we have the last period of government. Probably is something that we need to see what's happened with the new government and with the new policy. And if this perspective, for instance, mother law or well-being will change, or we are gonna keep working on it, not as just in paper, in practice. So probably is something that we have also to analyze. There are a lot of issues on this forest perspective that we have to like separate, I would say, in order to analyze, in order to understand how we can understand this process. And regarding the control graph, I think I was trying to think how we distinguish forest and land, because the thing is we are okay. If we want land, so we don't have to have forest. So this is the thing. So I was trying to think how the regulation is part of it. That is, I think on this control grab, but also we have a lot of examples, probably some other stories, how people organize in order to control the access, but not all of them. Of course, we have a lot of cases, but when people, they have their own land, they are sure about their property right, they have more possibility to control. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, all of the smartest things that I might have said, I think were largely articulated, but I have a few small things to add. One, one thing that'd be interesting, because I hear Diana's point about sort of tree cover maybe being a kind of a reductive way of thinking about what you want to understand. But even still, whether you take that measurement or another, I'm sort of wondering if it would at all be helpful. You have these really wonderful maps, but of thinking about sort of like overlaying the institutional change with the forest change over time, right? So that you could say, okay, what is the percent of forage change, or what is the percent of livelihoods derived from forests lost? Would be maybe a potentially a better thing, right, than forest change or than covered change, right? At the same time that you're looking at what are the property rights regimes in these areas at that time, right? You might then sort of, I'm not sure if that's an empirical grounding that you want to bring to this, but it could help you sort of think about like, what is the consequence of articulating the commons in this way? Like what is the sort of empirical thing that we can say that might come out of this like really helpful conversation around thinking about what it is that particularly like as you've written it out, Indigenous communities are doing on the ground. And I think that could be, and that seems a little bit like what you're trying to say, but I think that over time would really help you a lot. And then thinking a little bit about how you're joining these levels of institutional analysis together, right? Because this is always the challenge of, right? I'm starting to talk a little bit of a conversation here about one of the challenges of some of the frameworks here is that one of the shortcomings is that they don't scale especially well, right? It doesn't help us really understand how you link community governance, a la what is in governing the commons, right? Small community center with all of the mapping of sort of top-down institutional changes that you have done, right? That's a lot of work and a really helpful understanding and laying out, but I think that you are in a really good space to help us sort of start to think about how we join those things. And so I was sort of trying to think about if or how you have thought about joining those levels of analysis and whether something like the empirical point that I just mentioned could be it. And then I just also want to second Aisha's point. I think for the purpose of the presentation, it will be a little bit helpful to sort of suggest or note some of the authors that you are speaking to or you see yourself in conversation with, so that it's really clear sort of what the nature of the conversation is that you want to be having. Because I think you have so much here. You've done a lot of this work of describing this arc over time and grouping it together. And I think that would help. I think you already know all of this, but I think it might help your audience a little bit to offer us a little bit of reference points along the way. But that's just a smaller point.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think this the maps and all this physical analysis requires a lot of work. I was just talking about this at the beginning. Okay, this is what I can need. So we need more analysis on this, because I'm thinking like in these three categories of the framework, the physical, the people and rules. So probably we need to work more. We need to work more on it, and this type of analysis. In the 90s, we have foresters working with us, so probably we need more try to discuss these issues, how to understand these things. I was thinking in how to connect these things here, this operational level. Probably we don't have the spaces of collective action. So because how we can connect, so we need this collective arena to connect these spaces, and we don't have in general. I mean, For instance, I was thinking like in courts or assemblies or some other spaces, then we can discuss and say, okay, this is our forest governance. Want you to introduce in the law or probably it's something that we have to analyze. I was thinking also on this municipal level, probably there can be a space of discussion before to go to the national state in order to discuss specific issues on municipalities, that is, municipalities with people from these communities. So I think we need to work more on it.
So it sounds like it's both an empirical and a methodological problem.
The methodological province is the big challenge.
Cool.
Can I?
I think we're at time right now, but I don't know if we can.
We do have a second one after this, and I don't want to take time away, but maybe in the break in the